The Dominion of New Jerusalem, a geopolitical and ontological overview, 2049. Part 1, The Genesis of the Great Relocation. The collapse of the American experiment was not a singular event, but a cascading failure of biological, environmental, and social systems. The cardioviral pulse of 2028, a pathogen that specifically targeted the vascular linings of those under high stress, effectively decapitated the middle management and logistical infrastructure of the United States. This silent heartbreak pandemic hit the aging bureaucracy of DC and the overextended corporate headquarters of the coasts with lethal precision. While the coastal federations retreated into digital isolation and the empty quarter became a graveyard of failed corporate states, the Heartland Confederacy found itself in a state of terminal dehydration. By 2032, the Mississippi River was a dry, toxic trench, and the Great Lakes were being bled by illegal pipelines to the west, leading to the infamous Chicago water riots and the subsequent failure of the Seattle Accords. Simultaneously, the Levant underwent the tectonic war. The use of tactical, low-yield nuclear devices by regional proxies rendered the Galilee and the coastal plains of Israel biologically hazardous for a projected 3 decades. The Knesset, operating from an underground bunker in the Negev and directed by the predictive output of the Golem algorithm, recognized that the state of Israel could no longer exist as a geographic entity in the Middle East. It had to become a portable sovereignty. The algorithm, a vast quantum neural network trained on centuries of halakhic jurisprudence and real-time global logistics, identified North America as the most viable landing zone. Specifically, the fractured, resource-starved heartland was seen as a population in need of a contractual father. The Golem predicted that within 12 years, without intervention, the American interior would descend into cannibalistic feudalism, rendering the territory useless for the relocation. Operation Blue Star began as a humanitarian intervention, but evolved rapidly into a total civilizational transplant, using massive desalination barges parked in the Gulf of Mexico and AI-guided Golgotha drones to clear trade routes of highwaymen. The Israeli Provisional Government saved the Heartland Confederacy from certain extinction. The Covenant of Salt, 2038, was the formalization of this gratitude. The theological merger was orchestrated by the Sanhedrin of the Plains, a group of rabbinical scholars and evangelical restorationists who utilized the two houses of Israel prophecy to argue that the American Midwest was the literal wilderness prepared for the return of the lost tribes. This doctrinal synthesis, termed Abrahamic realism, suggested that the U.S. Constitution was merely a rough draft for the Ark Covenant, and that the relocation of the Holy Seat to Kiryat Habayit, formerly Washington, D.C., was a reverse aliyah, a homecoming to a continent that had supposedly always been part of the divine plan. Part 2, Governance and the Three-Tiered Reality. In 2049, the Dominion operates under the Ark Covenant, a legal framework that replaced the U.S. Constitution. Rights are no longer inherent, they are contractual, based on one's relationship to the covenant. The Supreme Court has been replaced by the Sanhedrin Federal Court, a hybrid body where constitutional questions are resolved through a synthesis of American Federalist precedent and rabbinical law, while local civil matters, theft, property disputes, follow a modified version of common law. All capital and spiritual security cases are adjudicated by the Grand Sanhedrin in Kiryat Habayit. This court system operates on a principle of nested sovereignty, where the state manages the physical infrastructure, but the Sanhedrin manages the moral architecture of the citizenry. Citizenship is strictly tiered to maintain the sacred order. 1. The Zera, the seed. These are the architects and the elite. Defined by matrilineal descent or the 7-year refinement, a grueling conversion process involving rigorous theological exams and mandatory service in the Magan Dominion's elite research wings. Zera citizens carry the Shema chip, a neural link that provides real-time halakhic updates and biometric synchronization. They are the only class permitted to carry sidearms within city limits, a nod to the old Second Amendment, now reimagined as the duty of the defender. For the Zera, the law is not an external restriction, but a biological constant. The chip nudges their serotonin levels when they engage in righteous acts, and triggers acute nausea when they approach a forbidden zone. This neurotheology ensures that the elite are physically incapable of dissent without severe physiological penalty. 2. The Jertoshov, the resident alien, the vast majority of the former American population. They enjoy the Noahide peace by accepting the 7 laws of Noah. They can own land and trade, but are barred from judicial roles and high military command. Their lives are defined by Sabbath lock technology. At sunset on Friday, their smart homes, vehicles, and devices enter a hard state of rest. This has led to a peculiar cultural shift. The American barbecue has been moved to Thursday nights, a frantic, smoky celebration of identity before the mandatory silence begins. The Ger Toshav are essentially guests in their own ancestral homes, required to pay a protection tithe to the central treasury in exchange for access to the desalinated water grid. They are granted temporary dwellers permits, which must be renewed tri-annually via a character assessment performed by a local mashgiach. Mub 3. The Akum, the excluded, the uncontracted. This includes atheists, secularists from the old coasts, and Trinitarian Christians who refuse to renounce the triune heresy. They are relegated to the Sde Aza Gaza fields, located in the radioactive zones of the Southwest or the derelict Rust Belt. They possess no legal standing and serve as the labor force for the Dominion's massive Tikkun Olam geoengineering projects, such as the manual dredging of the toxic Mississippi or the refilling of the Ogallala Aquifer. To be Akum is to be an ontological ghost. The Merkava does not recognize their existence, and the drones are programmed to treat their movement as biological noise unless they are in a designated work detail. They live in sovereignty-free zones, where the law only intervenes to prevent mass escapes or to cull populations that have become non-viable for labor. Part 3. Architecture of Control. 1. The Sabbath-locked residence. Technical schematic. A standard Ger Toshav dwelling in Kiryat HaKadosh is a masterpiece of passive enforcement. The structure is integrated with the Mishkan OS, a kernel-level operating system that manages the home's relationship with the Ark Covenant. At precisely 18 minutes before sunset on Friday, the house initiates a ritual handshake with the local regional server. The lockdown sequence is absolute. All biometric switches for appliances are disabled, leaving only Sabbath mode circuits active, low heat warming plates, and preset lighting. Any attempt to manually bridge these circuits triggers a tithe penalty against the occupant's credit score. The windows, layered with liquid crystal films, darken to obscure the street, reinforcing the introspective mandate. If the Golem algorithm detects high-frequency electronic noise, unauthorized radio, or offline media players, the home's water supply is automatically throttled until a mashgiach clears the spiritual breach. 2. The 7-year refinement, the path to Zera. For the Ger Toshav youth, the only escape from second-class status is the refinement. This is not a simple conversion. It is a total cognitive restructuring. Years 1 to 3, the wilderness, immersion in Hebrew and the logic of the desert. Candidates are stripped of old-world American history and retrained in the Abrahamic realism timeline. They perform manual labor in the Sde Aza, witnessing the fate of the Akum to instill the fear of the void. Years 4 to 5, the tabernacle. Candidates are assigned to Magan Dominion drone shops. They learn to repair the Ophanum drones, taught that the machine is a physical extension of divine will. They undergo the first implantation, a dormant Shema chip that monitors their metabolic responses to prayer and study. Years 6 to 7, the Ark. The final stage involves a psychological deprogramming of the ego. Candidates must publicly renounce their atavistic heritage, the old American flag, secular music, and individualistic philosophy. The process culminates in the Great Sanhedrin oral exam, where a single hesitation in applying halakhic logic to a hypothetical scenario can lead to permanent rejection and contractual demotion. Part 4. The architecture of the Merkava and the Magan Dominion. Technology in the Dominion is sanctified. The Merkava is a walled garden intranet where search results are filtered through Mishnah logic processors. For example, a query regarding freedom of speech is automatically redirected to a lecture on Lashon Hara, the evil tongue, explaining why individual expression must be subservient to communal holiness. The Internet of old is considered a digital wilderness full of pagan static. Access to the outer net is a capital offense, punishable by total digital erasure and relocation to the fields. Even the physical hardware is kosher certified. Circuit boards are etched with microscopic verses from the Torah to ensure that the electricity flowing through them is ritually clean. The military, the Magan Dominion, has abandoned traditional armored warfare for Ophanum units, rings of silent electric-powered drones guided by the Golem algorithm. These drones create a dome of iron over Zira enclaves, while lone soldier conscripts, mostly Gertoshav seeking citizenship upgrades, patrol the borders of the empty quarter on horseback or in vintage electric trucks. Horses have become a status symbol for the border guard. They are unhackable and pre-digital, capable of navigating the lawless zones where the Golem's signal flickers. They fight the wilderness bands, groups of old U.S. Army Rangers and Marines who have devolved into nomadic tribes, worshiping a syncretic religion of constitutionalism and survivalism. These bands utilize dark mesh networks, physical runners, and carrier pigeons to circumvent the Golem's omnipresence. Field Diary, Entry 402, The Shadow of the Arch. Location, Kiryat HaKadosh, formerly St. Louis, MO. Author David Miller, Gertoshav Class 2, Logistics Coordinator. The pre-Shabbat siren just wailed, a low, mournful sound that vibrates the windows of my apartment. It's a sound that strips the color out of the world. Tomorrow is the day of dusting, and my mashgiach is coming. My hands won't stop shaking as I check the pantry for chametz. The inspection is not just for leavened bread. They look for conceptual chometz, books printed before 2038, flags with 50 stars, or any media that hasn't been scrubbed by the Merkava. My daughter Sarah spent the evening practicing her Hebrew verb conjugations. She's 16 and wants to join the Dominion Aerospace Force. To do that, she has to start the Zera conversion, the 7-year refinement. She looks at the Magan soldiers in their white and blue uniforms and sees heroes. She didn't see what I saw today at the Arch. A judge sentenced an Akum farmer to the loss of a hand for stealing a water filter. The farmer screamed that he was an American, that he had a right to a jury of his peers. The judge didn't even look up from her Golem terminal. "The Covenant is the only jury," she said. Her voice was as cold as the steel of the arch behind her. This is the world Sarah wants to be part of, a world where justice is an equation and mercy is a rounding error. Sam, my son, is the real danger. He's been listening to the 4th of July Underground on a salvaged shortwave radio. He found an old Springsteen record in the cellar, Born in the USA. The inspector's Shema chip can pick up the resonance of the old world, the very chemical composition of pre-Dominion plastics. If he finds that record, my whole family will be sent to the Gaza fields to dig for lithium. I hid it in the attic, wrapped in an old American flag I found in a thrift shop before the relocation. I can still hear the phantom beat of the drums in my head. We eat our ribs and cornbread on Thursday nights now, trying to cram all our Americanism into one evening before the lights flicker and the Sabbath lock freezes our lives. We are a family of ghosts living in a temple we didn't build. Sometimes I wonder if the Golem knows about the record and is just waiting for Sam to play it so it can justify a total purge of our sector. Internal memo, the Smithsonian dig, restricted Zira eyes only. Subject, preliminary assessment of Site 01, the Lincoln Idol. Lead archaeologist, Dr. Avram Weiss. Date 12th of Nisan, 5809. We have initiated the neutralization protocol at the Lincoln Memorial. The Golem algorithm flagged the site as a node of atavistic descent. The structure is being converted into a barracks for the Kiryat Habayit Guard, but the central statue presents a persistent ontological challenge. Sonar scans indicate the marble is embedded with reinforced steel that seems to vibrate at a frequency incompatible with the Merkava's synchronization pulse. During the sonic scrub of the north wall, my assistant, a convert who remembers the Seattle Accords, remarked that the Gettysburg Address reads like a lost book of the prophets. She argued that the old Americans were not idolaters, but were attempting a covenant of equality that mirrors our own. This is the seed of the Maccabee liberation theology, the belief that the original Maccabees would have fought against our dominion for its Hellenistic reliance on AI and ethnostratification. This theology is spreading among the younger converts. They see our reliance on the Golem as a form of modern idolatry, the golden calf replaced by a silicon algorithm. When we attempted to remove the statue's head, the district's power grid suffered a catastrophic surge. The drone net momentarily destabilized. The Akum laborers in the nearby camps stopped and faced the mall in total silence. It wasn't a protest, it was a synchronization. It was as if the pagan idol was broadcasting a signal that bypassed their lack of chips. I have recommended we cease the destruction and instead encase the entire memorial in a lead-lined concrete sarcophagus of silence. We cannot destroy these ghosts. We can only bury them deep enough that their whispers don't interfere with the logic gates of the Merkava. If the Golem cannot account for the Lincoln frequency, we may need to reconsider our occupancy of the mall entirely. Tactical Brief, the Wilderness Insurgency, Sector, the Ozark Highlands. Unit, 4th Offenham Recon Status ongoing. Skirmish subject, the Green Beret atavists. Intelligence suggests that a remnant of the old 5th Special Forces Group has established a constitutional sanctuary in the deep karst topography of the Ozarks. These wilderness bands are utilizing non-electronic signaling, mirrors, smoke, and complex whistling to evade the Golem's auditory sensors. They have mastered a form of ghost tech, mechanical devices with no thermal or electronic signature. They are heavily armed with pre-Dominion weaponry, specifically cold steel and mechanical firearms that do not require an authorized biometric pulse to fire. They have been seen conducting baptisms of liberty for Akum refugees who escaped the fields. Our drones are struggling with the tree canopy and the high iron content of the rock, which causes signal attenuation. Recommend the deployment of Zira-mounted cavalry units to conduct a ground-level purge. We cannot allow the myth of the unchipped man to persist. If the Jirtoshav believe there is a life outside the Ark, the desalination tides will fail, and the entire heartland logistics chain will collapse. Capture of the insurgent leader, known only as the Major, is a priority alpha objective. Transcript. The 4th of July Underground VHF Analog. Speaker, The Boss. Broadcast date, July 3rd, 2049. Listen up, you ghosts. They say the Covenant of Salt saved your lives. They say the Golem knows what's best for your children. They've moved your holiday to Thursday, and they've put a chip in your neighbor's head to make sure you don't pray to the wrong flag. They tell you the Mississippi is clean now, but they don't tell you whose hands scrubbed the sludge or how many Akum children are buried in the mud of the levee. But tomorrow is the 4th. They can lock your cars and turn off your lights, but they can't turn off the sun. They can't unring the bell that's buried in your chest. If you have a scrap of red, white, or blue, bury it in the dirt tonight. Let the soil remember the color. When the Sabbath silence hits tomorrow, walk outside. Look at the stars. No chips, no algorithms, just the sky that used to belong to us. We aren't Girtoshav. We aren't Akum. We are Americans. Stay loud, New Jerusalem. The arch is just a piece of metal, and even the Golem can bleed if you find the right wire. They think they've fixed the world, but all they've done is build a bigger cage. Tomorrow, we show them that even in a cage, the ghost still sings. We are the storm coming from the empty quarter.